talk about your relationship to UWM and the Roberto Hernández Center.
Well, my relationship started, or knowing about UWM, was when I was a student from South Division. That was back in early 1970s.
South Division High School.
Yes, and I believe it's senior, and my mom used to go out a lot from our home because she was involved in the community activities that were happening back then. And one of the issues was in our community was the need for higher education for students, for Latino students to get prepared to go to college. And at that time, we've noticed also students at South Division, which I was one of them. We also noticed that other, like the majority of the students which were Anglo-Saxons, they were being prepared for college through counseling and all that by the school counseling and counselors. And one thing we noticed that Latinos, we were not being counseled as well to continue our higher education. And that was one of the issues that we had back then. I said, wait a minute, why are these other students being prepared for college, and we as Latino that can speak 2 or 3 languages are not being prepared to continue for higher education, to proceed in other careers other than skill work? We were geared more to find skill jobs, or training, or mechanics, or restaurants, or cleaning, whatever. That's what they thought about us. And I remember that time because there was a discussion between students too that we noticed that in those days, back in the early 70s, 68, 69, 1970, at South Division, we were, because we spoke more than one language, we were looked at as, we had a mental deficiency because we spoke more languages. and that freaked us out. Yeah, and I said, wait a minute. I mean, that's not true. I mean, it ain't my fault. I was born in Laredo, Texas. The border crossed me. I didn't cross the border. Plus, you know, if you look at history, Latinos or Mexicans used to be in this part of Wisconsin too. Back when the 13 colonies were being developed, were created and established back then. All this area, even this area in Milwaukee, used to belong to Mexico, and a lot of people don't realize that. But that's history. And it says, well, wait a minute, we were here first. And in those days, there used to be a lot of discrimination against Latinos and blacks and all that. And they used to tell us, hey, go back to your country. I said, wait, go back to my country? I'm already here. I mean, hey, that's why I tell people, hey, I didn't cross the border crossed me, but I'm proud to be an American, a U.S. citizen. But also, we have roots here in the U.S., you know, like Texas, California, New Mexico. That would belong to Mexico, but now they're states for the U.S. So we still have those roots here, even though the political view has changed to more fascist mentality today. You know, believe it or not, it has. They don't realize that we as a country, as a diverse group, are more prominent to succeed and make this country more successful than what it is today because of the combination of ethnic groups, cultural traditions, and we're all proud Americans, no matter what, when it comes. And that's the thing that we saw back then. And then that's when I used to see my mom come in with ladies and then go, and then about a news time, I used to see her in the news getting arrested by police and all that. But that was the scene back then, because as students too, we saw that. We saw that there was a lot of discrimination against Latinos, and we weren't being allowed to apply for jobs for the state, for the motor vehicle, police department. The Latinos were not allowed to. They weren't qualified to join the Milwaukee Police Department back then, or the fire department, because of the height requirement. That time the height requirement was over 5.9. So how many Latinos or Asians or that that tall, you know what I mean? So at the time, there weren't that many Latinos. So my mom was involved in that, in those issues too. Well, there was community issues that were plaguing our community. We were a community and a growing community back then because I remember when we were living here in Milwaukee, the majority of the neighborhood back in the South Side were composed of Germans and Polish and other groups, and we were Latino. And I remember when I first arrived to Milwaukee, I saw other Latinos, which I thought they were Mexican too, but no, they were Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico. Because I remember in one course at South Division, one of the professors told me, hey, there was a new student that came into the bilingual program, because my mom was also involved in creating the bilingual program with Tony Baez and other people in the community. She was also involved in that. And I remember because I used to go to those meetings too. And then on one meeting, in one class, one of the teachers came over and said, hey, we have a new student. Can you tutor him? Well, because he only spoke Spanish. And you will be surprised. You know, the student, he was Ismael Acosta. He was a well-known boxer at UCC. They even got a building named after him at that time. And I was his tutor when he first arrived from Puerto Rico. And that's when I mentioned that at that time, Latinos who only spoke one language, especially Spanish, they had a mental deficiency. That's how they were being treated back then, which was wrong at the time. And that's why our community stood up and says, no, wait a minute, that's not right. I mean, we're stakeholders in this community too, and we do have rights. We pay taxes, and they're not giving us that, what we call in our community, the piece of the pie, to share the piece of the pie. And that's how I got into my blood. You know, I mean, I saw the activities. I saw what my mom was achieving to make sure that our family had the opportunity and the option. If we wanted to, you know, to continue with higher education, it was up to us if we wanted to decide or not. You know what I mean? But that's one of the things that I saw what was happening here at UW. And then when it opened up, and then they succeeded, and I think they came in first to UW as a protest, but they came in before any students were arriving at UW, and it was a failed protest. And then the second protest was August 27, 1970. That was a successful one. That was which they took over Chapman Hall. And Chancellor Klaus at the time had promised to meet with the community and other people, you know, that were, because there was a diverse crowd, you know, with diverse protests. It was Anglo-Saxons, Puerto Ricans, there were Mexican nationals and students. And what happened is that he canceled at the last minute. So they got tired of it and said, no, we're not leaving until the chancellor meets with us. So and then that's when they started closing down, and they warned people if they won't go out, they were going to be arrested. And they arrested 4 individuals back then, which was Jesus Salas. He was one of the key organizers back then. Dante Navarro was another key organizer. He passed away. And then there was Goyo Rivera. He was a Puerto Rican. And then a friend, Sanchez. He was one of my friends. And then my mom, too. You know, she was arrested. Marlo Anderson. I'm a proud son of Marlo Anderson. And she was the only woman arrested at that time. And because I remember, because Sanchez, Jose Luis Sanchez came over, and after it happened, he came over and we talked. And he says, "Oh man, Nelson, what happened? Oh man, they arrested me with your mom at UWM," you know? which was you know, it was interesting. I said, well, I mean, you got.
She wanted the women to be represented, right?
Well, yes. The thing is that there was most of the organizers were male. And before my mom got involved in the movement, you know, at that time, the organizers that were mostly male had a difficult time organizing the community, because at that time they were seen as young individuals, male individuals that like to party or whatever, and they were organizing because of civil rights and all that at that time. Then when my mom knew what was happening and realized that the community needed more to get involved in order to make changes. That's when she decided to join the group. And then once my mom decided to join, then her friends decided to join because she knew a lot of people. And then the friends, relatives, and you name it. And then it went all the way. But it was, to me, until, you know, and I still do credit, it was because of the women influence back then in 1970 that the male counterpart were successful in succeeding. What they did is to create the Roberto Hernández Center. And not just that, but they brought down the walls of discrimination, the barriers that were back then, which was, it was practiced by the administration back then at UW-M, not just here, all over the state. And the thing is that and it was an unwritten policy, but it was, you know, and then they expected Latinos that were coming in, because I think there were about at least less than 15 or so Latinos that were here at UW-M, but the majority of them were foreigners, were from foreign countries that were well off, and they came to the U.S. to study, and which is great, you know, fine. But the thing is, and at that time, the administration was failing to meet its goal in order to get more Latinos interested in education, which would bring a whole new educational concept to UW-M, which it wasn't there before, which would mean, you know, Spanish language books. UW-M at that time, they didn't have no language books. I don't know if you've seen that picture where Chacon and Fela Salinas and other people are at the counter, and they're talking to this lady. Well, they were talking to, and then Jehu Salas. That was when they came to the library to request books that were written in Spanish or bilingual books, and they didn't have none. Yeah. And that was one of the issues. And I'm glad what they did was phenomenal. I mean, hey, it changed the whole system, because what our community did back in 1970 that helped create the Spanish-Speaking Outreach Institute, and then it was renamed the Roberto Hernández Center, is that they opened the doors for Latinos to come to get enrolled at UW-M, even though we were, I believe it's still the first state ever to do that, in which they allowed students from high school to enroll in courses at UW-M and not being graduated yet to join the university. And I was one of those students. I was one of those 50 students back then, and it was an exciting thing to do. You know, I mean, all of a sudden we're from South Division, which was, you know, a school district, to a higher educational institute. You know, I mean, oh wow, you know what I mean? And it was, personally to me, it was different. You know what I mean? And I enjoyed it, but sadly, I was able to drop out about a semester or so from UW-M at that time for family reasons or whatever. But then back in '84, I decided to re-enroll and finally finish my college, you know, my college degree. And as a promise to my mom that passed away, because she, right after the protest, when she was arrested, she enrolled at UW-M too, and she graduated. And she was the role model. She was the first in our family to graduate with a college degree, and I was in education. And, you know, that's why we were proud of her and what she did and her sacrifice, including the rest of our community, which are countless names that I can say that helped change that. And as you know, they created the Spanish-Speaking Outreach Institute. It had been created by, not that they had to, they were forced to create it because they were failing to meet the community's need to have its members continue higher education with the option if they want to or not. The option was never there before. You know what I mean? And some people were privileged to come in and all that, but we weren't at that time until that. And they suffered because our community had a backlash from the status quo and government back then here locally, when they were protesting for rights and civil rights and all that. The police, well, at that time, was headed by Chief Breyer, and his mentality, well, he was a police chief for life, supposedly, back then. So nobody could fire him. And the thing is, his mentality was kind of like a fascist. I mean, if you were a minority, you did something wrong. Yeah, I mean, and then we had to confront these police officers that were over 6 feet. I mean, wait a minute. And then they were beating on our community at times with our community provoking them. So there was a lot of discrimination back there too. But we didn't stand by and let it happen. Like, okay, you beat us, we're going to go away. No, we weren't going to go away. We're here to stay. And the thing is that we continue to grow as a community. And then that's when came back in 1984 back to UWM, and once I got involved at UWM, I met some students from La Colectiva Student Organization. He was Ricardo Gracia, and Ricardo Gracia also was the founder for El Satélite newspaper. It was a student newspaper back then at UWM, and I joined the group and as a member. And at that time, I noticed that the group was more isolated here at UWM. But then when I came in with a new philosophy, and I'm glad they accepted it. Because as I joined, I talked to Ricardo, and I said, well, Ricardo, it's great to have an organization like Colectiva, and you have a newspaper medium to communicate with our community and UWM students. But what we need more, because I saw the difference, we need to more engage, participate with other student groups, with the Black Student Union, the Native American Student Union, and the gay and rights. You know, we Palestinian. That's how we open. La Colectiva opened its doors to everybody. So when we used to have events, we used to bring Latino groups into college, the university to play, and then we invited all the groups, and they all participated. They all came in, and especially they love the tacos too, you know. So I mean, it helped our group, and it helped our Latino culture here at UWM too to be accepted at UWM. And then I remember one time when Felipe Rodriguez, he was an interim director for the Spanish-speaking Outreach Institute. He called me up. Luckily, I was at the office, and I answered and started talking to him, and he was really worried. And he told me that the administration had plans to integrate the Spanish-speaking Outreach Institute with a multicultural center and try to kind of like phasing it out. And I said, wait a minute, yeah, phasing it out. I mean, and at that time, SSOI was complaining about lack of money. You know, they weren't having a lot of money for whatever. And you know, it was interesting because when I found out about that, right away, I told them that I would take care of it. And at that time, I was so involved at UWM. I was a freshman too. You know what I mean? And I was.
What year was this again?
Oh, that was back in 1984. And I was a freshman, and then I was involved in La Colectiva. I was involved in the Satélite. I was involved in other groups, and you name it. It was surprising because I was taking 18 credits back then, but I was so involved with organizations and all that, and that's where I learned. Yeah, that's where I learned how to cram, you know, for exams and all that. And it was an exciting moment for me. I mean, because it was a whole different, you know, experience, and I was just grabbing it, you know what I mean? And then what happened was that after I got that call, I said, wait a minute, and I started thinking about it. Wait a minute, that's not the agreement. What was agreed in 1970 with UWM and the SSOI, it should be, you know, independent and all that, and to serve students and whatever. So I was able to get some students right away, call some students up, and I think it was about 6 or 7 of us. And I think it was Yolanda Hernandez, Josie Rivas, Isidro Gonzalez. He was a former president. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. And there was a whole bunch of Alicia Herrera was there, Nidia Flores, Miguel Ferreira, and Anthony Garza, and Navidad Rodriguez too. And the thing is that when we went to Chancellor's office, we didn't have an appointment. I just told them, let's go. This is what's happening, and we need to stop this as soon as possible, and whatever. And when we were walking to the chancellor's office, we were discussing. I said, well, if all things fail, well, we're going to have to organize our community and come back like we did in 1970. And we already decided as students. And it was surprising because La Colectiva back then was a student organization, was more like social. But now with this event, this issue, politics got into it. Administrative politics from UW-M got involved in that they were going to try to intercept our future and the future of following Latino generations that were coming into UW-M. Because every semester there were new students coming into UW-M, and that was going to affect them. I said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And then one of the key things that I was able to succeed with members of La Colectiva was, wait a minute. Because the one thing I noticed is that they never challenged administration as much. And I said, wait a minute. We're students. We pay segregated fees. We pay their salaries. You know what I mean? And they're all looking at me and say, wait, what? Yeah, of course. We pay their salaries. They're here because of us. If we weren't paying, the fees, they won't be having the end. They won't get state money or anything like that. And then finally they realized that, well, yeah, wait a minute. We are a student empowerment in our university, and the university should give us an opportunity to participate with them to make this university a lot better than what it is. And that's when we went to the office. We didn't have no chancellor's office. We didn't have an appointment. And then I think the one that met with us was assistant vice chancellor John Schroeder, I think it was, yeah. And then I'll make sure I've seen that. When we walked into Chapman Hall, I mean, I just kind of like a flashback. I said, oh my God, I can't. I mean, I'm trying to, and I told the students, the residents that were with me, man, you know what, man? I mean, do you know that our community walked through this Chapman Hall back in 1970, August 27, 1970, that changed this whole thing and allowed us to participate in higher education? You know what I mean? And then for us to come back again for the same very issue that they're trying to eliminate, what was created back then. Mm-hmm. And we were all destined to fight for what our community fought for, and our parents and whatever. And when we met with the chancellor, it was really surprising because it was a long table. We sat on this side and he sat on that side, and man, he could scream and yell at him. I mean, it was how long, and I always remember that. But then he came in and talked to us and all that, and I explained to him the brief history of what was our community back in 1970, what they did on August 27, and what was accomplished, and why we were there. And I told him straight out, I mean, hey, we learned that the UW administration and the Department of Letters and Science has a plan to integrate the SSOI with a multicultural center. And as to us, as we see it, they're attempting to try to phase it out. And he looked at, and I told him, I said, well, put it this way. I mean, if you and the administration and Dean Halloran, William Halloran back then, continues with that plan, I promise you, and I guarantee, and these are the students that are here with me, and they can also, agree with it, that we will organize our community, and we'll be back with our entire community as we did back in 1970. And then, she looked at us, and whatever, and then, we said our goodbyes and all that, and I went back to the office, and we all went doing our staying, going back to class. Next thing I know, Felipe Rodriguez calls me. Later on, Felipe Rodriguez calls me and tells me, Nelson, I don't know what you guys did, but the whole plan has canceled. I said, really? Oh, okay, sure. Well, great. That's great. So we left it at that. Mm-hmm. And then, but if we as students want to challenge that, probably the Roberto Hernández Center would not be there. It would have been phased back, because I think what we didn't know back then, but what came out, because I graduated in 1988, and after I graduated, well, other students took over La Colectiva and whatever, and what I learned after that, 1988, that's when other students that were back then were active, they learned too that they they try to do the same process to try to eliminate, phase out the Roberto Hernández Center now. And in that part, we found out that Dean Halloran was taking money from programs geared to the SSOI and the Blackstone Union. He was taking those monies without letting anybody know, or even the advisor. Like, you need money, you need to use this money. Fine, if you don't, well, if you don't need it, we can use somewhere else if it's okay. No, he was shuffling that money to other programs, which what he did, but he got busted back then, back after I graduated, and that's what I've learned. And he was doing it before we even went down there and spoke to the chancellor to stop this. We didn't know that, and now I know why Halloran was so nice with me, because he didn't want me to go and investigate it and what else about the monies. But the good thing about it is that it stopped, and we stopped the phasing out of the SSOI and the Roberto Hernández Center, which later became the Roberto Hernández Center. And it's interesting because back in 2001, after I graduated in 2001, National Council La Raza came into town, and National Council La Raza is a large organization for civil rights, you name it, and they do state conferences in every state. And when they came to Wisconsin, it was the first time they're coming to Wisconsin to do a conference. That was in July in 2001. They noticed that a lot of volunteers for the conference were highly educated. They were Latinos. They're highly educated. And one of those meetings was the publisher of the El Conquistador newspaper, which I was the manager of, and his name is Victor Heike. He was at that meeting. And they asked him, how, it surprises us that we've been to a lot of states, and this is the first state that we've seen that has a lot of Latinos that are highly educated, and they wanted to know. So what Victor did, he came over and spoke to me and said, "Hey, Nelson, this is what happened at the meeting and this and that. And Nelson, I know you've always been wanting to write the story about the history of the SSOI and Roberto Hernández Center. Well, this is your chance." And he gave me about a week or so for the conference. So what happened is really interesting because here I am in 2001 after I graduated in 1988. I said, well, and I remember because when SSOI used to have events here, they used to post pictures from the protest. And I used to see them, man. I knew the history, but it wasn't really celebrated all around the community at that time. UWM or whoever here. And then I said, well, wait a minute. If I'm going to do this story, I had it all in my mind, how I was going to write it for years. And I think we published a photo for the Satellite newspaper. Was in 1985. We published one photo where the individuals that were arrested back then were being put in the paddy wagon back then. And that was it. That was a front page. But then I said, well, I gotta go to UWM and go to the Roberto Hernández Center, because I know they got pictures from that protest, and I want to see if I can use some of those pictures. So when I came in, believe it or not, that was July 5th, 2001. And I came in, and I was excited to do the story and all that, and I already had it on my mind and how I was going to do it, and all that. I needed the photos. So I came in, and it was in Bolton. I think it was located in Bolton. And I walked in, and nobody was there. The offices were closed for the Roberto Hernández Center. Yeah, SSOI back there was back in 2001. I think it was already the Roberto Hernández Center. I think it was named the Roberto Hernández Center back then, yeah. And I knew there was a committee that was created, or several committees that were created, that included students and staff and you name it, that were deciding what the future of the SSOI or Roberto Hernández Center was going to be. You know what I mean? But at that time when I walked in, because I went in, I talked to Carmen Cepeda. She was the head of she was the only one that was at the office, as a secretary or administrator there at the time. And I presented myself as Carmen Cepeda. Hey, Cepeda, my name is Goodson. And then she told me, oh yeah, you're Marla's brother. That's how they knew me back then. I said, yeah, you know what, Carmen, I came over to see because I'm doing a story. I'm doing an update on the SSOI and the Roberto Hernández Center. There's a big conference coming into town. They want to know why there are a lot of highly educated Latinos here in Wisconsin, or especially Milwaukee. And I'm doing an update on that. And I asked her, do you know anything about what's going on with Roberto Hernández Center? She says, nothing. Do you know, because I know they had some photos, and I wanted to see if I could be able to use some of those photos in my article. And he says, well, we don't know where the photos are. What do you mean you don't know where the photos are? He says, no, and this actually happened. I said, no, we don't know. I said, what? Well, who's the director now? He says, William Villas. But he's the interim director. He's on vacation. He won't be here for a while. Okay. Well, who else do I talk about SSOI? Do you know anything? Well, no. She said that they had just laid off, or I think she told me that there was one counselor that was just laid off. And I don't know if it was for the season or for the semester or what, but it was closed. And she told me, you know what, Nelson? We were just talking about 1970, because there was a guy here earlier before you, and we were just talking about what happened back then. And I said, oh, wow, you know, what coincidence, you know what I mean? And here I am. And then all of a sudden I said, well, anybody else here? No, says, no, well, there's a dean's office. So I said, well, let me go talk to the dean's office, see if they know anything about it. So when I go out to the dean's office, I told them who I was. I was H. Nelson Goodson I was a managing editor and reporter for the Colectiva newspaper, and I'm doing this update for the SSOI for a conference that's coming into town. And they told me, we don't know. Even the dean's office didn't know what's the update or anything. And they told me, well, you know what? There's Chapman Hall right across the building. You can go up there and talk to them. That's the channel or something, whatever. And I go, and I thought about it. Oh, my God, here I go again. So then I went up there, and I opened the door. When I first opened the door, the same flashback came back again. What I had back in 1984, about the 1970 movement. It says, oh, no, here I am. I'm out here again. Wow, you know what I mean? And then I walked in, and, I felt that presence, what happened back in 1970. And then I walked up, I knocked, and there was a door open, and somebody answered, and I introduced myself, and I found out that it was Assistant Vice Chancellor Leslie Schultz back then. And she introduced to me and told me that she was just coming in, and she was preparing to come in and all that. And so, and I told her that I was there, and she gave me an opportunity to talk to her. I says, sure, come on in. And then we sat down, and the first thing I asked her, I says, well, I introduced myself, and then I told her what I was doing, and then I asked her the question, do you know how many Latino students enroll at UWM? You know what she told me? Not enough. When she told me that, I said, oh, man, she synthesized to the Latino community and students and all that. I said, great. Well, then I started explaining to her, and told her, I said, look, there's nothing. I went to the SSOI, nobody knows what's going on. I went to the dean's office, nobody knows what's going on with the SSOI. And I need some information because I'm doing this story because of the conference and all that. And you know what she told me? Oh, I got it right here. Great. You got it right? Yeah, I got it right here. We're supposed to be sending this out to the community. It's a 2-page draft. She opened up her drawer in the desk, took out 2-page draft, and I still got copies of that. And she handed it over to me, and then when I started reading it, I said, oh my God. You know what I mean? The whole process, what they were trying to do was in there. What they were following.
A new attempt to...
Yeah, about the Roberto Hernández Center, what plans they had for the Roberto Hernández and all that. And that was on the 2-page draft.
And this is in 2001.
2001.
And what was the plan in that draft?
It was, like they were going to look for a director. And that's when Figueroa came in. Okay. And other things, I got copies of that. And then when I read that, I looked at it, I said, oh my God, this is a gold mine. I said, damn. And she told me, well, we're supposed to, it's a draft, but we're supposed to send it out to the community, but we don't know, we're working on it. And I said, okay, and can I use that information? She said, well, it's a draft. And I said, oh, well, then she said, okay, sure, she made me a copy. Gave it to me. And I said, man, I got it. So, you know what I mean? And then, we said goodbyes and all that. And then she told me that she was going to have UWM participate at the NCLR conference. So it was great. I was able to get UWM to go and participate too. And then when I went back to the office of Roberto Hernández Center, Cepeda, hey, said, Carmen, check it out. Get a couple of copies for you. You know what I mean? Make a copy. Now you know what's going on. Chicho was stunned, you know what I mean? Because there was no information out there. And right after that, I went. That was July 5th, that day. And then when I went, I did the story. And I included that information. Well, she gave me the two-page draft. I included it in the story at the end. And I gave her credit. Who gave it to me and this and that. I don't know if you've seen that two-page article that I wrote. Yeah, the first article that I wrote was back in when it first came out, was in the paper, was in July 13, 2001. That's when it came out. And then I did a revision after that, and then I made it into a two-page article. It took out all the advertising and all that, but the process, the whole thing is there. What was in that two-page draft, and the good thing about it is that now that I think about it, years have gone by, and I think about it, I said, wait a minute, you know what? I don't know if it was destiny. I don't know if it was coincidence or an act of God or what, or our ancestors looking over our shoulders that led me to the right path to get this information out to the community. Because once it was published, believe it or not, once it was published, UW had no choice but to implement it. And I don't know how many people received that letter, because she told me she was going to be sent out to the community. But as of the day, I haven't heard anybody that received that letter. I mean, some people might have received it, but I don't know. I mean, they never mentioned anything. The good thing about it is that it was handed over to me, which I had a revenue to make it public and get into more hands than what UWM did in that time. But I give credit to UWM for doing what was right back then, and to continue to look at us that we are a source, a successful source that brings in culture, help UWM get sources to continue providing services like the Roberto Hernández Center is doing today, and continues to do so today, because of that, there have been thousands of students, Latino students, that have graduated from UW-Milwaukee. But what a lot of people don't understand, and I try to tell people, is, well, it just didn't help Latinos at UWM. It opened the door when the SSOI was created and our Latino community came in and protested back in August 27, 1970. It didn't just open the door for Latinos at UWM. It opened the door for every school of UWM has, college, a two-year college and four-year colleges of UWM had. And not just that, it also went beyond that to private colleges and universities that started enrolling students, and MATC too. Because I know MATC back then had their staff and student population grew real fast, and most of those administrators and instructors at MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College, helped operate Mexican Fiesta. Mexican Fiesta was created, I don't know if you know about the 3-day festival every year. Mexican Fiesta was created in order to generate funds for students to come to college. That's how it was generated, how it was established. But it was established as a community event in the community. Because I remember when I was in South Division, we weren't allowed by the school district to celebrate El Cinco de Mayo or September 16, Independence of Mexico. In those days, we had to fight for that right. So what we did, we started celebrating outside in our community, and we walked out of South Division too. In certain times we did, and then we had support from the Puerto Rican community too, because they were suffering too, that they weren't being allowed to enjoy their culture either, or celebrate their culture either. And the thing too is, a lot of people at that time didn't understand, is that Puerto Rican were given the right to keep their language, to that agreement with the U.S. and to provide Spanish language, whatever, when voting here in the U.S. too. A lot of people don't understand that. That's why when that thing came in about the second language, first language English, I said, wait a minute, first English language. I mean, we know English is spoken here, but everybody has a right to speak their language. But why you're trying to get rid of the Spanish, from the government and all that? But they can't, because that was the agreement that was done with Puerto Rico, and now people don't understand that you cannot eliminate that, because then you eliminated the treaty with Puerto Rico back then, the Jones Act. Yeah, and it's something that's there, but many people, they know about that. And that's what helped us too with our bilingual program when we fought for it. And the model that was established here in Milwaukee by Tony Baez, he was one of the leaders in that bilingual program. Enriqueta Gonzalez too was involved in that, my mom, and other community people, is that when that bilingual program was established, it was used as a role model in Illinois and other states. Right. Yeah, and it still continued. And it's been successful. Why? It came out of the Latino community here in Milwaukee. That's why I tell people, I says, you know what? And it's a fact. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I tell people, you know what? Since I've been here in Wisconsin since 1968, when we first arrived, one thing I've noticed, and I still notice today, the status quo that's in charge of government or whatever has never given us anything. We had always had to stand up and fight for what belongs to us as stakeholders and taxpayers in this state and in this city. And it continues today. And people just looked at me and said, wait a minute, it's true. But UWM helped our community, because a lot of our community became highly educated. And they moved and made a lot of changes in our community, and it's because of the Latino community that a lot of changes, like why minorities are being hired at the motor vehicle department, the Wisconsin Motor Vehicle Department. Why the Milwaukee Police Department finally got rid of that prerequisite that you have to be a certain height to be a police officer and fire person, individual, and now you see Latinos, Asians being police officers or in the fire department. And that was because of that. It's our community. And that's why I'm proud that I was able to be in that, how can I say, I'm just proud to be part of that transportation of being able to participate on higher education, which actually opened the doors for a lot more opportunities for our community and myself. And right now, I'm the administrator for Hispanic News Network USA, and that's just one blog, and that has a viewership of over 24 million. Yeah, and that's just one of them. And I created that to establish that as a voice for our community, to continue fighting for our rights, and to make sure that our community has the option for other opportunities, if they decide to take those opportunities. And but it's due for my experience being here at UWM, working with administration, working with student government, and then with La Colectiva and Satélite, and working with other students that from diverse nationalities that helped me succeed of what I am today, and I'm proud of that. Yeah. I have no regrets, and if I have to go through it again, hey, I'll do it again.
It's a fantastic story too. Especially the way that your activism grew out of that initial 1970 kind of seed where you were there with your mom, right?
Yes.
And then being able to witness activism, and then bringing that along right into the these subsequent
and that was the best thing about it, is that she gave me that opportunity as an option. If I decided to take it, it's there open. The door is open to higher education. If you decide to take that step, it's open. And I did.
Yeah.
And I have no regrets. And and the whole process and living in our community, I look at it as a vehicle to success. It was important for our community. It still continues to be important today. That's why it's very important for us and whoever listens to this oral history to realize and understand that we should never fall asleep. We should always be aware of what's happening in our surroundings and to protect for what we have. Especially the Roberto Hernández Center, it has been such a success and is well recognized for helping thousands of students, Latino students, go through the educational process and receive their degrees, not just as undergraduates, but as masters and you name it. And not just here in Milwaukee, but throughout Wisconsin. And it's a major success that I believe, that we should be proud of. It's a positive history that I say and like you here at UW, like yourself and the Roberto Hernández Center, or recording all these oral histories for future generations to come. Yep. Because it is important, so we don't repeat the mistakes that we had done.
Yeah, no, I think that you provide one of the best examples we have, of why it's important to know what happened.
No, that's true.
So you can safeguard it.
And I'm just I'm glad that I was given the opportunity to tell my story.
Yeah. Always. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you want to add?
That's basically about it. Okay. Any other questions that you might have? Or?
I think we could probably talk forever, I guess. But I think we've got you too.